Should we kick it off?
Yeah, let's do it. So welcome everyone to our webinar, Uncertainty Breeds Anxiety. Today we have Jessica Kriegel, Rob Frohwein, Kathryn Petralia, and we will go into the next slide, which talks a bit about them and their roles. And I will let each of them do a brief introduction as to who they are and what brings them here today.
Great. Hi, I'm Dr. Jessica Kriegel. I am the Chief Scientist of Workplace Culture at Culture Partners. And so I lead research and strategy on all things culture for organizations that we support, and otherwise currently working on some research with Stanford around what works to drive sustained behavioral change and business outcomes for organizations.
Hi, I'm Kathryn Petralia, co-founder, along with Rob, of Keep. Our goal is to give employers and employees access to flexible compensation that helps them stay and enjoy their lives together longer.
Hey, and I'm Rob Frohwein, co-founded at Keep with Kathryn. This is our third entity that we started together. We started this because we really experienced all the challenges that Keep addresses, namely recruiting and retaining great talent, and dealing with the challenges that organizations face when they've got holes in their talent and they can't meet objectives like product delivery goals, sales goals, and other issues inside the organization.
And I can take it from here. I mean, when I first heard about Keep and I met Rob and Kathryn, I was so impressed in the approach that they were taking to transforming culture. And the reason is because a lot of people out there have a lot of solutions for culture, and this one is something unique. And so I was really excited as part of this webinar and other ways in which we're partnering together to help the world understand some creative solutions to culture. And this is a problem that most CEOs are aware of, and it's just going to get worse. So let me share some information with you about the future of work and the future of culture and why leaders need to be thinking differently. And the first thing I'm going to share is this: the birth rate has dropped 20% since 2008. And at the time, people anticipated that that was going to be a short-term drop in the birth rate that was due to the Great Recession, that would bounce back up after a few years once the economy got strong again. And the reality is it has not bounced back. That birth rate has remained low. And that has severe consequences for the workplace and for people generally. And one of those is there is an anticipated 15% drop in the incoming class for the year 2025 that higher ed institutions have been aware of, and they are anticipating. They're calling it the demographic cliff. So that 15% drop in the incoming freshman class for higher ed institutions, that's also a 15% drop for the workforce, for people who go straight to work after high school. And a few years later, it's going to be a workforce cliff for professional services for those graduating 4 years after that. So 2025 is not 10 years from now. This isn't the long-term future of work. This isn't a year and a half. I mean, these changes are happening rapidly. And so what implication does that have for the workplace? It's basic supply-demand economics. And this is, if you've taken any econ course, as I did reluctantly in college, you will know that when there is less supply of something, the value of that thing goes up. There's more demand for it. And in this case, there are less workers that are going to be available for the workforce, and their demands, the worker demands, are going to be more and more important in order for companies to attract and retain and engage talent. And that's something that Keep and Rob and Kathryn and I all share a passion and a purpose around, is how do we allow organizations to thrive in their purpose and their mission by being creative in the ways that we attract and retain and engage talent? Because also that creates employee fulfillment, which at its simplest level, I'm all about trying to help people love their jobs. And I think Keep is too. What you're seeing right now is the shift in the balance of power. It's played out in the news in many different ways. You're seeing increasing unionization, quiet quitting, the great resignation. People are going on quit-tok now, TikTok, and they're quit-talking, which is where they literally will live quit their job on video and post it on social media. That is because they're getting fed up with the way that they're being treated. They're having negative experiences that are leading them to feel like they're not in a place that values them. They're not contributing to something bigger than them. They want something more. And companies who are winning right now, the clients that we have, the CEOs who are totally nailing it, are the ones who get that. And they are putting people first. And they're putting people first in a way that is personalized and customized to their needs, because they know that what people want is important, and that is ultimately culture. People define culture in a lot of different ways. I'm talking to CEOs on a daily basis about culture, and I ask them all what they think culture is, and they all have different definitions. But the definition that we have come around in our research is it is experiences that shape beliefs. It's basically the way that people think and they act, because those beliefs drive actions and ultimately are what get a business result. So culture, we believe, is the key to driving results. And it all starts with experiences, the experiences that people have in the workplace that shape their beliefs about the nature of work that they're doing, about their colleagues. And those beliefs are what going to get them to do one thing or do another. The actions that they take are driven by their mindset and their beliefs. And those actions ultimately get the business the results or not.
Jessica, I'd love to break in for a question, just ask you a question that others might be wondering. How do you think the changing economy has really changed, has really impacted the need for employers to cater to employees? Has it had any impact at all?
I love that question, because there is a wild disconnect between some of the headlines we're seeing. I mean, you've seen all of these layoffs in the news, right? Big organizations, Amazon, Microsoft, everyone is laying off, at least in the tech sector, but outside of the tech sector as well. But the April jobs report just came out and the job market is hot. The unemployment rate went down. There is high inflation, and yet there is not actually a connection between what we're seeing in the headlines and the reality of the situation. And so many of the organizations that are having these big layoffs, frankly, are leading with fear. They're worried about what might happen. And the reality is that they're kind of creating the reality, the very reality that they're afraid of. And that is creating an experience, which leading to belief, which is taking action and therefore getting the company a result. So I would say if you actually look at what's happening and then the way that people perceive what's happening, there's a massive disconnect there, because the companies I'm talking to, they are struggling to attract and retain talent. Even Amazon, if you look at the AWS layoffs that they're having, that's their most profitable center, and yet they're still laying people off. At the same time, they're having massive issues attracting talent in other parts of the organization. So it's a common issue, but that's a great question. So I'll keep talking about this results pyramid. This is a very simple framework that we use to help leaders understand how they can affect sustained behavioral change and drive intentional culture. We believe that culture is all about results. And so at the top of the pyramid is the results you're trying to achieve. And those results can be financial in nature. They can be about market share, about employee engagement, whatever the result is that's most important to the strategy of the organization is at the top of this pyramid. And all results come from actions. Every result is a direct result of an action that employee takes or doesn't take, right? And those actions, that action mindset is where most leaders get a little bit stuck. They get stuck in what we call the action trap. They full stop here. We're not getting the results we want. Let's take another action. And sometimes that action is, we've got to improve our culture. Maybe we should get a ping pong table for the lobby. And that doesn't necessarily drive results, right? So then they think, well, let's think about a different action. Maybe we'll restructure the organization. And that still doesn't get them the results that they want. So then they implement some kind of new process, and that still doesn't get the results that they want, because the reality is, if you want to create sustained transformation in your business, you have to go beneath the action trap to beliefs. It's the way that people think. And it's yeah.
Okay. But I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was thinking about some of the things you were talking about with respect to what people think is culture versus what it is. And, you know, I think that's changed a lot in the last few years. And has our mindset shifted with the way we interact with employees directly, as opposed to the things we give them or make available to them?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. That the 10 years ago, it was really popular to talk about culture is not just about ping pong tables, and CEOs were being informed of some new information, but the market has evolved. I think most CEOs understand that ping pong tables are not the key to culture anymore. They're doing a lot of initiatives, though, around the area of culture, like employee engagement initiatives, and they have things like a chief diversity officer to create an initiative around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think there's still a lot of work to be done for the modern and intelligent CEO about understanding the core beliefs that people bring to the workplace and that get developed at the workplace through experiences. It's right now, you and I are having an experience on this Zoom call, whether we're in the office or not. We can create culture through experiences. When my boss sends me a text, that's an experience that leads me to a belief. For example, the other day, I sent a text to my boss and I said, I've got bad news. He said, oh no, what's wrong? And I said, one of our vendors isn't working out. We're going to have to move on from them. And he responded, oh, Jessica, I thought your daughter was sick. Vendor news isn't bad news. Something in your family that's of importance would be bad news. That was an experience that led me to a belief, that he has perspective about what's important, that he cares about my family. And that leads me to take action, which is I'm more motivated and excited to, give my all to this company because I know the company cares about me. So I think that's what we're seeing shifting in the mind of the CEO today is they're much more elevated in the way they think about culture. The next step, culture 3.0, is not a bunch of programs, but rather, operating in a mindset area all the time in the way we show up. Great question. So that leads me to experiences. I mean, that is really at the heart of everything. And I think this is going to be a great introduction to what you can share with us. And what I was so impressed with Keep when I first saw what you were doing is you have a really unique way of creating an experience right from the start for employees, because ultimately the core question that everyone I think needs to ask themselves is, what beliefs do your employees hold about how they are cared for, about what their leadership is there in order to help them be fulfilled in their day-to-day life, about everything from mental health issues. We talked about, uncertainty breeds anxiety. There's a lot of confusing and conflicting news that we don't know how to react to that's creating fear. It's how does my employer take care of me and care about me? And so maybe I can pass it over to, who am I passing it to? Rob or Kathryn?
Passing it to me. You're passing it to me. But I have one question for you before we go. Can you take us down one level, and what's a typical engagement look like for culture partners? How would give us an idea of what happens and how you guys engage and what you do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we take people out of the action trap and we help them activate their culture through a journey that we take them on to scale culture. I mean, most of the CEOs that we work for with these large organizations, they get culture. They understand the importance of putting people first, of creating the right mindsets, but they are only one person. And so our job is to activate culture to drive business results so that organizations can achieve what it is they need to achieve at scale. And what that really looks like, most culture consulting firms out there start with, we're going to do an assessment of what's wrong with your culture, and we're going to give you a list of recommendations so that you can fix what's broken. Our approach as a culture consulting firm is to start by asking the question, what do you want to achieve? What results do you want to hit? Because your culture now is perfectly aligned to the results that you're getting right now, but where do you want to go? And we're going to help you align the entire organization around achieving those results. And so that's what we do. We take people on a culture journey.
That's great. Thanks for that. And I'm glad we could do this, and we'll segue in. We experience absolutely matters to organizations, and the way we really look at it is experiences happen both in the workplace, but they also happen outside of it. So we'll dive into that in a second. I'm going to flip this over to Kathryn right now to talk a little bit about what we do and how we think about things.
I know that we are intrinsically aware of the fact that everyone is different and that we all need different things, and we come to our jobs in different stages of our lives with different objectives, personal and professional objectives. hold on, I didn't do a great job with that. So one thing that is different is every employee's financial profile. Some people are single, just out of college. Some folks are growing their families, growing their lives, getting married, wanting to take a trip, having children. Student debt is a huge issue for so many people who are joining the workforce. We actually had an experience at our last company where lots of new to workforce employees who were coming out of school couldn't even participate in our 401k matching program because they had to use that money to pay off student debt. So until you really get into it and have these conversations, as Jessica referenced earlier, with folks who are joining your company, you don't really know what's going on with them. And so you can help employees through personalized compensation, and we pay everyone the same way. We pay everyone every 2 weeks. We do an end of year bonus, and all of this is based on some probably room full of old white guys 50 years ago who figured out a way to make some money on compensation. So it's okay, Rob, I'm not talking about you. You're not that old, but it's important to be able to personalize for employees while still maintaining equity and parity and all of the things that are important to your organization from a compensation perspective, but to be able to meet employees where they are.
So to personalize compensation, we had to think about it we look at the entire spectrum of compensation, salary, bonus. Some folks receive equity. There's obviously lots of benefits out there. One of the real missing pieces was the ability to get paid up front for in a couple of different ways. One is to pull forward salary that you might have a big expense coming up, shortly. We had we said that, student expense, you might want to pay off your student loans in their entirety. You might have a wedding coming up where you have a $10,000 or $15,000 bill. What folks are usually relegated to doing is actually putting that on credit cards. And then they accumulate all this credit card debt, and then they have huge expenses, have to pay huge interest on the wedding they just had, which is really a bummer because, that's supposed to be a really fantastic, positive event. Well, instead, wouldn't it be great if you could say, look, over the next 2 years, I'm going to make X from my employer. Why don't I just pull forward $15,000 or $20,000 of that so I can have the wedding of my dreams, not have to go and borrow on credit card, and I can really have the experience I want and have a lot less stress. Of course, to do that, the employer is doing me a favor. They're allowing me to pull the salary forward, so I'm going to commit to them that I'm going to work for them for the years that I pulled forward salary from, and that's just a give and take. And what that does, really importantly, is it makes the employer really invested in the employee, and it makes the employee realize that the employer really helped them out with something that was hypercritical in their life, not necessarily in their work, but in their life, sort of getting back to the experiences happen both inside and outside of it. And it works for the employer because the employer has a lot of anxiety around whether these critical employees are going to stick around. And so by this give and take, you really solve that problem from both folks' perspective. And this, uncertainty breeds anxiety. You resolve it on both sides of the equation. So that's what a vesting cash bonus, but it's used in lots of other ways as well, which we'll get into in a moment.
Rob, can you just break down exactly how Keep works? Because I think it's really important for people to understand. I think it's revolutionary.
Yeah, it was born out of an experience I had representing somebody who, literally had those expenses, student expenses, a baby on the way, needed to take a new job. And he had a very specialized skill. He was a physician, and he agreed to move to an area where he's never been from. And they encouraged him with an upfront, what they called a forgivable loan, a larger sum of money that allowed him to get started, with the ability that if he stuck around for 4 years, it would be forgiven, meaning that he would not have to pay it back. We looked at that structure and we said, we like that concept of people committing, getting cash up front, but having some period of time that they commit back to the employer. And so what we did was we really created a technology platform that allows that to happen. Some of the words are different. It's not called a forgivable loan anymore, but the effect of it's the same, as you get access to cash earlier. And as you commit to that organization and spend that time, you effectively vest or you earn those amounts that have been provided up front. But it is a hard thing for an employer to implement by themselves because it has a huge administrative component to it. It has a legal, regulatory, and compliance component to it. And then, of course, there are some employees who leave a company for one reason or another. Could be perfectly valid. They had to move somewhere for family, but they owe a portion of that back. And it becomes a big hardship for organizations to get that money back. And we actually manage both the servicing and collection of that money and do it in a way that continues to maintain the sterling brand of the employer. And so that's what Keep does. And we're doing it on behalf of all sorts of organizations right now.
And who is it for? Is it mainly for software developers and those type of workers?
Well,
Perfect timing.
Oh, hello.
So, it's interesting. We first started Keep because we'd been in technology, and fintech for a long time. We kind of presumed it was going to be for folks like us and for employees like we had. But what's interesting, I think what was different for us at our last company is we had people who were software engineers. We had customer facing folks doing customer service and sales and collections and everybody in between. And so we realized this product is for everyone, for any employee, that it's important to attract and maintain. When we think about industries, there are a lot of them that are in particular pain right now. Places like healthcare and transportation and logistics and restaurant, retail, hospitality. So it's really for any employer that is really working hard to, attract and maintain the talent that they need to maintain whatever service levels, they're trying to achieve. And when you talk to most people, especially in the finance department, they always seem to understand that one of the things that's really important to meeting your revenue goals is having the right people in your organization. So really, it's great for any type of employer and any type of employee.
all right, this is me. So where are we going though? It sounds, you hear it and you go, oh, that's pretty cool. We can issue this instrument to employees and allow these employees to align and stay together longer and happier. But what we see this as the beginning of the crumbling of the way traditional compensation has been structured. And again, as Kathryn had said earlier, it was devised many years ago, and there is a lot of value that goes to people other than the folks who are working and the folks who are employing them to work. There are banks and payroll companies who are making unbelievable sums creating this kind of structure or system. So we think there's an opportunity to really change that and allow employees to get truly flexible compensation. And what that means is, as Kathryn referenced before, employers size the compensation. They say, Kathryn, you're going to make X dollars. But then Kathryn goes, that's awesome. This is the way I'd like to split it up between upfront cash. I'm willing to make a commitment for a couple of years here. I need this level of salary. I need this. I would like this much in equity because I really believe in where the company is going. And I want to put a fair amount on the line based on the performance of me and my company over time. And by the way, you might elect that on day one, and you might be 3, 6, 12 months into it and decide my life circumstances have changed and I need to modify those dials a little bit. So go in there and modify them. You might need a little less cash up front, but you might need a little bit regular salary during the course of the year. Because of budget, you've worked on your budget, you know exactly how much you're spending each month. Even more cool will be the moment that we ask you to connect your bill pay in your bank and other things to our system, and we'll actually tell you whether you're in alignment or not, and help you modify that on a real-time basis. So that's where we're headed. We think it's a tremendous opportunity. We're just getting started on that right now.
And how complicated is it to get started with Keep?
We literally had a client the other week that liked it and was set up and started issuing Keep bonuses, as we call them, in under 10 minutes. It's a very, very fast process. You don't have to connect it to your HR system, although we integrate with dozens of HR systems. And we can do that obviously and make it a broader implementation. Or if you say, I've got an issue today, we have an employee who's about to leave to a competitor. We want them to stay and we want them to stay for a while. We want to issue them a Keep bonus. You could get it done before this webinar is over, although we'd really like for you to stay and listen to the rest of the webinar.
That's great. Can I ask a personal question? I mean, you guys sold cabbage to American Express, right? Why did you start Keep after that? I remember the first time we chatted, I'm like, why aren't you on a yacht somewhere hanging out? Why is this important for you at a personal level?
Because our spouses didn't want us in the house all day long. Go ahead, Rob.
No. I think I should have let you. You can answer this one.
I think we're just entrepreneurs. I mean, we've both been part of so many startups, and it's really hard to look into, read the news every day about an issue that's really meaningful and important and was always important to us, which is, attracting and retaining talent, and not try to figure out how to solve that problem and figure out how can technology help to address that. And doesn't everybody deserve to get compensated the way that works best for them? So at the end of the day, I think we always try to root for the underdog. And I don't mean to say that all employees are underdogs, but I do feel like it's really hard sometimes to get what you need from your employer when everything is so regimented and strict and how we provide compensation. And wouldn't it be great if employees had the flexibility to work the way they want and get paid the way they wanted?
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, I think that's the end of the presentation portion of this. I don't know if there are any questions from the folks that are here. I also I have some really cool stats at some point that I want to sort of share with folks that talk a little bit about some surveys that we did, but I'll wait and see if there's a question that we can answer first. Kai, I don't know if you're on, if there's anything that you've been able to see.
Yeah, so we do have one question here, just about, what it means to personalize a bonus. So I think there was a question about someone saw personalized compensation and how would it, what would it mean or look like for an employee to personalize a Keep bonus?
Kathryn, do you want to go, or?
You go ahead.
So personalizing compensation, it really comes down to making a decision, understanding what your what your next 12 months, 24 months look like. You might have tuition, you might have to pay off student debt, as I mentioned, you might have a down payment you want to make on a house. You might be just out of school and you're moving to a new city for a job and you didn't get much in terms of relocation expense, and you need to set up an apartment and buy sort of the initial things that will stock your new apartment in a town. And so it means really understanding the amount of capital that you need and making sure that you have commitment. It's funny, signing bonuses were for years, they started out years ago and they were highly persuasive in attracting employees to join an employer. But then what happened is all similar employers who offer signing bonuses started offering them. So then they all started offering the same amount. And they also all started offering the same term, what they call the clawback, if you should leave early and pay back. And I'll talk about that in a second. The challenge is when an incentive to do something becomes commonplace across everybody, it loses the nature of the incentive. It doesn't become persuasive, it becomes table stakes. And so what Keep really allows employers to do is potentially increase the amount of a signing bonus, extend the period that you expect the employee to stay employed. And by the way, research has shown that employees become most productive once they've hit 2 years of employment. So why give a signing bonus with a 1-year clawback? It really is the period of time that actually hasn't allowed the employee to become super impactful to the organization yet. Your signing bonus should really encompass the period where they're going to be contributing in a meaningful way to the organization. That's what counts. That's what's getting ROI out of your compensation. So that's sort of the way I think about it. Kai, thanks for that question. I'm happy to run through a few stats too.
And there was one other question too.
Go ahead.
So another question that just came in is, how does this differ from equity?
Well, that's a great question. I think it's completely different than equity. There are two types of companies that provide equity to their employees and companies that don't. So for those that do, many of them have found, and there's a lot of data about this as well, Rob, this may be one of your stats, but a lot of employees would rather just have cash than equity if given the option. And we think back to our last company, we gave everybody equity, but many people had to wait a long time. I mean, it was 12 years after we started the company before we sold it, and they waited a long time to get liquidity from that. And so I think that that's one challenge that employees face. And the other one is there can be tax consequences that impact them before there's ever an opportunity to get liquidity. For those employees that don't get access to it, it's a great tool for retaining employees. And that's the way that equity is generally used, is a tool for retention. If you could give employees who could receive equity an option to receive some of their compensation in equity and some in cash, not everybody is in a position to take equity. Some people really need the cash right then for a variety of reasons we discussed earlier. For those that don't get it, it makes them feel like they're getting equity. And it's a great tool to get them excited about the role and get them excited about the work and the company that employs them.
Awesome. So I'll share a couple of statistics. 52% of employees that leave, we did a survey of thousands of folks out there. 52% of exiting employees say that their manager could have, actually this was a Gallup poll, could have done something to prevent them from leaving. So even when those employees leave, and it reminds me as we were building our company and somebody would come and say, building Cabbage, say, oh, that's impossible. Like, just because somebody's made a decision to leave doesn't mean that they've actually made a decision to leave. There's still an opportunity to keep that person. So if you want to, it's not time to arrange the happy hour to celebrate the person's new role, leaving the organization. Maybe it's time to do something else and figure out why they're leaving. And I'm sure, Jessica, that you see that a lot. I'd be curious about when people leave an organization and it has really been a cultural mismatch for them. Is there something folks can do when they're walking out the door to actually save a person, or is that a little bit too little too late for those employees?
Well, when one of the things that does work is what we used to call dive and saves, where you go in at the last minute and offer them a sum of money in order to stay. So that certainly does work. And I know that there are some leaders who view that as ineffectual because they think that those people have checked out mentally. That's just not the case. I mean, we saw it work over and over again. I also think that some of this has to do with the front end when you're joining an organization. A lot of the times people think of this idea of culture fit, that if you're a good culture fit at an organization, you're going to fit in, literally. And that's a really dangerous way to analyze whether a job is right for you or a candidate is right for a company, because when we think about culture fit, most people are thinking about who would I want to go get a beer with? And that's not really how we find the perfect match between employee and employer. We try to encourage organizations to think about purpose fit. When I interview people to join my team, the first question I ask them is, what is your personal purpose and how do you feel like working in this role will help you live that purpose? When people feel connected to the mission, you were talking earlier when I asked you, why did you start this organization? Kathryn was like, we're entrepreneurs. That's who we are. And we're on a mission to help organizations figure out how to attract and retain and engage talent. That's your purpose. And I bet the people on your team who are more loyal and more committed and more engaged than ever, the people who share that mission. So I would say focus on purpose fit, not on culture fit. Dive and saves do work. I mean, it's Maslow's hierarchy.
That's a good question. I mean, do they work in the minute, in the moment? But you have a shadow of that. If they left because they felt like they're, they weren't happy, for lots of reasons, their experiences, the purpose fit, if I still don't feel that purpose fit with the organization, but you've agreed to pay me some, ransom sum for me to stick around, is that somebody you really want around?
Well, I would say that we have to look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I mean, There's a lot. I am very cognitive of the fact that when we talk about purpose fit, culture fit, and feeling fulfilled at work, that's a very privileged mindset to be in. At the basic level, first, we need to be able to support our family, to pay our bills, to feel financially secure. Those things come first, frankly. Once we've hit that threshold, the table stakes, then we can start to talk about things like purpose fit. So I think the financial element of culture alignment is really critical and to not be overlooked, because I mean, we're partners with UKG and some of the work that they're doing, and Great Place to Work specifically. And at Great Place to Work, they're talking about, you can do whatever you want to be a great manager, but if people aren't getting their financial needs met, you cannot save them, you know?
Yeah, no, look, and we understand that as well. I know we come at it, typically from a financial, perspective. So, but we firmly believe that there has to be this balance, right? You have to have, you have to want to be there, and you have to make sure it fulfills your needs from a financial perspective. But, the other piece of it is sometimes people leave because they feel like they are at risk in the organization, or, they're uncertain of their future. Again, uncertainty breeds anxiety. And so, those things can have a real effect on people leaving. And so by saying, hey, look, we're effectively going to sign you up for a couple of years, we're committing to you, you're committing to us, eliminates some of that and allows folks to focus on the things that are more important. Kathryn, I'm trying to think back, Jessica talked about, passion fit or purpose fit, I'm sorry, and culture fit, and purpose fit being really, I want to know if you're going to rename the firm Purpose Partners, by the way, Jessica. But how do you think, we had this crazy list of Kathryn and I interviewed everybody that joined Cabbage until we had over 350 people, and then we still interviewed a large number of the people till we got up to 600, and that includes people that had been there and left in the interceding years and stuff like that. So lots of interviews. And so we developed this crazy list of questions. We always thought of it as a culture fit interview, but I'm thinking there was some things around purpose that were in there too, Kathryn. I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, we were primarily trying to suss out, I think the thing that people think about culture is that they want people who are like them. I mean, I think entrepreneurs especially feel this way. And also I think CEOs of large corporations feel this way. It's this selection bias of, I want people who are like me. You see it play out in everything from investing to hiring. And so I think what we were trying to figure out is, were people comfortable being themselves, or were they comfortable with other people being themselves, and could they coexist with a bunch of people being themselves when they're not like them? And so I think that was more, and that is a purpose, because the purpose of our team was, to work together toward a common goal to serve small businesses. And so because you found people who didn't need everything to be about them, that it could be about others, they were able to serve that common purpose.
Well, it's interesting. We always talked about authenticity, or at least we eventually started talking. I don't think we realized that's what we were seeking initially, but that's became evident. We were seeking people who could be their authentic selves in the workplace. And when I left and I did a LinkedIn post, I wrote, which I believe, like, when you're at work and you can be yourself, and you can build genuine friendships, relationships with the people around you, because they see who you are, not who you think you should be in the workplace. Work stops feeling like work. It really does. It's not so much work, and it just creates a kind of a special atmosphere. So I obviously totally agree, or else we would have an issue if you and I didn't agree on that topic, right? Because we're partnered here to do this thing again and do it for that purpose.
So we do have one more question, not to derail this train of thought, because I really like talking about culture and purpose. But back to signing bonuses. So someone brought up that they're already issuing spot bonuses and signing bonuses. And so what's the difference between doing this themselves and then working with Keep and a platform like Keep?
You want me to do that, KP, or you?
Go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, a lot of people use signing bonuses. One thing is, I'd mentioned before, is they're often not enough money, and they don't have an appropriate level of time associated with them. So both the employee doesn't really get what they need because they really haven't grown over the years. And the employer doesn't have a commitment from the employee to stick around or, getting up to a meaningful amount of work. But more importantly, from an employer's perspective, not more importantly, but from an employer's perspective, the signing bonuses are typically that are given, those clawbacks are unenforceable. And if they're not unenforceable, they're not economical to enforce. And so you end up being in a situation where if somebody leaves, it's probably very hard to recapture the amounts that they owe back to the organization. The other thing is most organizations have no tracking system, no way of knowing who has these bonuses, when they are coming due, a path for, hey, when somebody leaves early, how to actually go about the administrative part of actually collecting the amounts that are owed. So they'll sometimes send an email and that's it. They send one email, payment comes in or doesn't come in, they're sort of done because that's not really what they do from day to day. Our system actually structures this as a 0% APR loan to the employee, typically when they're getting the cash up front versus just giving a normal end of term retention bonus. So the employee is really getting access to that cash day one with absolutely no cost associated with it. And it has a period of, it lasts for the period of that vesting that's been agreed to between the employer and employee. And as it vests, the principal amount of that note is reduced. So if you received a $25,000 signing bonus that committed you to 2 years for the organization, half vesting after a year, the other half after the 2 years, after a year, $12,500 would vest. The principal portion of the note would drop from 25 to 12.5. And importantly, at that moment, it would become considered income to the employee. So one other major difference between this is when an employer issues it themselves, they have to take the payroll and compensation taxes up front, submit those to the government. If the employee should leave, like in the example I just gave, after a year, they would have to get $12,500 back from the employee, but that employee only received $8,000 or $9,000 because it was reduced by the taxes. And so consequently, either the employer has to try to seek reimbursement for that compensation portion, or the employee needs to go seek it and fully pay back the employer. Either way, it's a pain. Then the final administrative headache is a new W-2 has to be issued, a corrected W-2 to the employee, because they received $25,000 of income on day one, as I described, but it turned out they only really received $12,500. So they actually have to file an amended tax return as well with the new corrected W-2, which creates a lot of time, expense, administrative hassle for the employee and the employer. So Keep fixes all that. We just fixed that through the structure that we've created. We could certainly describe that in detail after this webinar if you want to get in touch with us.
Wonderful. Well, thank you three for your time. Thanks everyone for joining. And please check out keepfinancial.com or culture.io for more information on Culture Partners or Keep. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.